If I woke up tomorrow and had to start learning French again, completely from scratch, what would I do? Where would I start? What would I learn? And in what order would I learn it? Bonjour et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Cindy. I'm a native French speaker who is also TEFL certified, so I know a thing or two about language teaching and language learning. In this video, I'm going to guide you through the steps I would take to learn French from scratch. But before I do that, let me draw your attention to the free 7-day email course I created to help you take those first steps into French. In the course, you get bite-sized lessons every day that include some useful phrases and vocabulary, some grammar tips, some pronunciation tips, and also some culture thrown in as well. And it's all in a logical order from the very beginning. So, if you're interested, click on the link in the description. But for now, back to today's topic. So, if I had to learn French completely from scratch, where would I start? Well, I might actually shock you because I wouldn't start with grammar and I wouldn't start with vocabulary either. So, what would I start with? Well, I would start with something called functional language or functional phrases, meaning phrases you would use in your everyday life that are very practical, very functional, they serve a very, very specific purpose. For example, how to greet people, how to order coffee, how to order food in a restaurant, how to introduce yourself, how to say what you do for a living. You know, phrases that would answer how-to questions. That is what I would start with. And I would learn it from a native speaker, or at least somebody who can speak French like a native speaker. And that way I wouldn't need to construct the sentences myself. I would be able to learn it off by heart and then start speaking from day one. And I would also be able to hear pronunciation the way it's meant to be pronounced, because you might as well also focus on your pronunciation from day one so that people can understand what you're saying. Basically, start as you mean to go on. But the number one thing to focus on is functional language. Phrases you will use in your day-to-day life. And you don't need any grammar to use them because you learn them as they are, as they come. For example, I'm thinking about bonjour, hello, au revoir, goodbye, où sont les toilettes, where are the toilets, je voudrais un café, s'il vous plaît, I would like a coffee, please. Those kinds of things that get things done or that give you the information you need in that moment. So once I've got a fair few phrases under my belt, I would focus on core vocabulary. So basically, vocabulary I know I will need every day on a day-to-day basis around topics that often come up in conversations. For example, I would learn vocabulary around the family, food, obviously numbers, all the basics, the weather, things that people talk about in, small talk. I wouldn't learn word lists. I would learn the vocabulary in context. So basically, instead of learning that frère means brother, I would learn the word within a sentence. So, j'ai un frère. J'ai un frère means I have a brother. So I would learn j'ai un frère instead of just un frère. Because that way, I'm not just learning new vocabulary, I'm learning how to use it. And also, in the case of nouns specifically, I would always learn it with un or une in front of it, because that will be invaluable later on. So even if you can't come up with a sentence for a word you want to learn, at least learn it with an article in front, un or une, so that later on it comes natural to you whether that word is feminine or masculine. So second, I would learn core vocabulary I would need every day, and I would learn it in context. The third thing I would do if I had to learn French completely from scratch is I would start speaking from day one, every single day. Now, I might not have someone to speak to, but it doesn't matter. I can speak to myself. I actually did that a lot when learning English, and, well, it's worked out pretty well. Anytime I had a bit of time alone, I practiced to myself. Sometimes I would even repeat the same word over and over again because it helps with pronunciation. And the good thing about starting to speak, practicing even on your own, is that when you actually need those phrases, those words in real conversation, you will remember them much quicker. So it's great for memory, it's great for fluency, and it's also great for pronunciation and for confidence overall. So yeah, speak to yourself, and it doesn't matter if you get things wrong. Practice makes perfect, and it's great for your memory, your confidence, and all that. So speak from day one. It doesn't matter if you feel silly. You will feel silly, but do it anyway. Step 4, and yes, it's the one you've been dreading. It's grammar. Yes, now you've learned a lot of useful phrases, and you've learned a lot of vocabulary, and you are practicing every day. It's time to focus on grammar. But don't just learn grammar for the sake of it. Don't go like, oh, this is probably the grammar you need to learn first, and this is what you need to learn second. No, just learn the grammar as and when you need it. So for example, if you want to learn how to describe your daily routine, then you will need the present tense. So that's when you learn the present tense. And you'll focus on verbs you need in order to describe your daily routine. So for example, you might focus on the verb faire, aller, so to do and to go, travailler, to work. Verbs that describe your daily routine. Step 5, and this one is much more fun than grammar. It is all about immersion. So obviously it's not feasible for most people to just up and leave and go and live in the country where the language is spoken. So what you want to do instead is you want to surround yourself with as much French as you possibly can, meaning you want to read, listen, and watch as much French as you can. So what you can do is, if you have any streaming services like Netflix or Prime Video or Disney Plus, you can switch it to French and watch it in French. You can also use subtitles if you want to. In my house, actually, we watch all our, the streaming services are all in French, because that way it helps my children, learn the language. Obviously, I speak to them in French as well, but it reinforces what they already know, and it actually teaches them new vocabulary as well. And I know that for a fact because my eldest actually said a word recently. I know for a fact I haven't told her. I've never used it with her. And so I was like, so how do you know that word? And she was like, I heard it on Bluey. So hey, at least we have a legitimate reason for her to watch TV, since she watches it in French. But yeah, it is useful. It does work. Something else you could watch is movie trailers that you've already watched in your language. I mean the movies, not the trailers. So you already know the story, and because you know the story, you're much more likely to understand at least some of the words in the trailer. So that's also a good idea. And also you can watch it again and again and again, because, well, trailers are usually only about 2 minutes long. Also, when consuming media, when reading books or when watching things, I would pick things that are aimed at a very young audience. In fact, the younger the better. So clearly I wouldn't read it or watch it for the content. But the great thing about things that are aimed at very young children is the language is very accessible, and cartoons aimed at, say, toddlers are often very well enunciated and quite slow as well. So I'm much more likely to learn new words, or at least understand the gist much, much better. So, for example, think about, Peppa Pig or cartoons like that, aimed at very young kids. Step 6 is revising. So I wouldn't strive to learn something new all the time. I would go over what I've already learned on a regular basis. So for example, I would test myself and go over phrases I've already learned and hide them and see if I can recall them out loud, that kind of thing. I would repeat and repeat and repeat what I've already learned, practice, go over things many, many times, and then, perhaps once a week, learn something new, but not every day, definitely not every day, because repetition is key and repetition builds automatic recall. So the more you go over things, the more you're going to remember it and the more you're going to find it easy. So your fluency is also going to go up if you keep going over things. So don't think you're doing nothing or you're not learning if you're just revising, because trust me, it's sticking in there and that's what you want. Now let's talk about tools. If I had to learn French from scratch, what tools would I use? Now the good news is there are more tools than ever to help you learn a foreign language, right? But that's also the bad news, because there are so many, it can be quite overwhelming. So the first one that comes to mind is apps. Obviously, there are a lot of apps out there that will help you learn a language. But personally, I would never use that as my main source of language learning, because typically they teach you phrases and words that you're not really going to use on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, I remember one time I tried one to help me with Spanish, and I remember one of the words it taught me very, very early on was the Spanish for a doll. Well, I think there are a lot more words I need to know before I need to learn how to say doll, So, yeah, instead I would pick a course I really like, and then I would go onto YouTube to go deeper, perhaps into some topics, but my main thing would be a course because it has structure and usually a logical step-by-step order, which I would find very, very useful. And aside from the course, I would also want to work with a French tutor, and I would likely pick a native tutor or at least someone who has learned French to such a level that they sound just like a native speaker, because then I know that I'm learning the right pronunciation from the start, which is very important and often underrated, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much of the language you can speak. If people can't understand you, it's kind of pointless. You can't communicate. So pronunciation is super, super important. So yes, a French tutor for the pronunciation and to give me feedback on my pronunciation, and also on the language I come up with on my own, because I need to know, am I making mistakes? What mistakes am I making? Where do I still need to improve? Those kinds of things that obviously are lacking from a course. I would likely use a dictionary, and if I use flashcards, I would make sure that only the image is on one side, not the words. The words would be on the back of it, because you want to be able to look at the image and think, oh, how do you say that in French? Whereas if the word is actually on the same side as the image, you can't do that. Now, what about AI? Some people use AI to have conversations in French and to practice their pronunciation, their conversational skills. Now, personally, I've never used it for that purpose. I've never tried it, so I can't comment on it. If you have, please let me know in the comments what you thought and how you got on, because I'm genuinely interested. I'd like to know if it's any good. The only thing I would say is I tested AI like in writing, asking, I can't remember what it was now, but it was something to do with French grammar, and I noticed that it did make some mistakes. So I think it's good as perhaps to ask for explanations about something, but always check that what it comes up with was actually right, because it does definitely make mistakes sometimes. But I'm sure eventually it won't. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember what Google Translate used to be like, and it was dreadful, especially if you wanted a sentence or a paragraph translated. It always got it wrong. Really, a lot of the time it made no sense. Nowadays, it's much, much, much better. So I expect that AI in years to come will be wonderful for language learning. Right now, I'm not sure, so I definitely won't recommend it. But do let me know your experience with AI and learning French in the comments below. So to recap, if I had to start learning French again, I would first start with essential phrases, then I would build my core vocabulary, so vocabulary I'm likely to need on a day-to-day basis. I would make sure I practice my French every single day, even if only to myself. I would then work on the grammar, but only as I need it. I would immerse myself in the language, meaning I would read, listen, and watch as much French as possible. I would revise as often as possible as well. I wouldn't keep learning new language. I would regularly go over what I've already learned, and I would use tools that work for me. So I wouldn't just keep trying new apps or the latest apps. I would just focus on something I like and stick with that. Because if it works, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But remember, you don't need to do it all at once. Just take the first step and build from there. But if you'd like some help getting started, please don't forget to check my 7-day email course. The link is in the description. And the course is full of practical phrases, so real phrases you'll actually use in your day-to-day life. And it has audio with it, so you'll know how to pronounce it. It's got pronunciation tips, grammar tips, cultural information, pretty much anything you'd want is in the course. And it's step-by-step, bite-sized, and all in a logical order. So if you're interested, please click on the link in the description. I'd love to see you there. But either way, I'll see you in my next video. Bye! À la prochaine!